If you're anything like me, you've probably been waiting quite a while for this lens to finally get its update. And I'm excited to share with you guys, this is the brand new Sony 85mm F1.4 GM2. This lens has got a lot of upgrades, a lot of improvements. In today's video, we're gonna go through the entire lens, kind of see all the different bells and whistles that it has, and all the features, and just kind of show you all the improvements that it has. So let's get right into it. So the 85mm focal range has actually been one of my favorite focal ranges for quite a while. I think it's really cool for street photography. I think it's really good for video. It just gets a good detail that's not too close, but it's not too wide. This is kind of my go-to lens for when I want to do like portraits. It's just a fun lens to have for that focal range. The only downside for me is the previous Sony model was always kind of just a bit slow. It had a lot of focus breathing. It was kind of heavy, and it just overall wasn't my favorite 85mm lens. In fact, I kind of replaced that first lens with the Sony Batis 85mm because I thought it just kind of performed a little better. Granted, it is a 1.8. So I'm finally excited to see that Sony finally did come out with the second version of the GM85. And I gotta tell you, this thing's got a lot more improvements to it than that previous one. And for me, this is gonna be a pretty far cry to not own this lens. So right away, let's just kind of take a look at the physical features of this lens and see kind of what is in the outside and what makes this lens what it is. So just like all the other G Master lenses from Sony, this is gonna have a lot of the same features, a lot of the same physical mechanical parts. So let's just kind of take a look at them. All right, so looking at the top of the lens, the first thing that sticks out right away is this now has the movable aperture ring. So you can go from f16 all the way down to f1.4. And you also do have the A mode. So that way, if you just want to use your camera to control the aperture, you can just stick to that. So on the side here, we do have the iris lock. So if you want to actually lock the aperture, you can just switch that over and now the aperture ring's not going to go anywhere. Then if you're a video shooter or if you just want to turn off the click, you actually have the ability to turn the click off. And that way the aperture ring will move freely without having any clicks or mechanical stops. That way is going to be good for like video shooters. So if you want to quick change your aperture without having any kind of movement or like vibrations in the lens, that's what you would use that for. So moving to the top of the lens, you'll see that we have one of the focus hold buttons as well as on the side. These can also be customized to be whatever you really want in the lens. So if you want to change that to be any other feature, you can change that to be that. They don't have to just be focus hold. And then below that, we do have the autofocus manual focus switch. So if you want to just switch it to manual focus and leave it that way, you can just do that. So moving to the front of the lens, we have a very smooth and precise linear manual focus ring. The front element is a 77mm thread, so I don't think there's a change with that. So just like all the other new Sony G Master lenses, this now comes with the 2XD Extreme Dynamic Linear Focus Motors. So you can have a very fast, very silent focus motors, which is going to be really good for video. So inside the lens, we have an 11-blade circular aperture, which is going to be really good for soft bokeh and those really just creamy, blurry backgrounds. So we have 14 different glass elements inside, all divided into 11 groups. 2 of them are extra low dispersion glass elements, and that's supposed to help suppress chromatic aberration. So I don't think you're going to get much chromatic aberration with this lens. We will go out and do some tests as well. Also, the glass elements are coated with a nano AR2 coating, which is supposed to subdue the flaring and ghosting inside this lens. And then also what comes with the lens is you're actually going to get your lens cap, your lens hood, and this little nice pouch. So you will be getting pretty much the same stuff extra-wise as you got with the previous model, but you do get those as well. So this is a weather sealed lens from Sony, so it should be 100% dust proof and weather resistant. It does have the weather gasket on the back of the lens as well. So as far as 85mm lenses, this is actually still a pretty compact lens. It comes in at 642 grams, which is just about 180 grams lighter than the previous model. It's about 4 inches tall from the camera to the end of the lens. So this is going to be a really good option for people who want to shoot on gimbals because it's going to have a lot of the weights kind of balanced more into the middle and it's not too far outward. So it's going to be easy to balance this lens on a gimbal, and I think it's going to make shooting on this lens really easy because if you've ever shot video on 85mm, it's really easy to get kind of shaky and because it's just so zoomed in. But having this on a gimbal is going to be a really good option for this lens. So as far as shooting stills, this thing's a pretty balanced lens on this camera. I think it's not front heavy. It just feels right in the hand. So let's talk about one of the biggest upgrades with this lens, and that's going to be the performance itself. So if you've ever shot on the previous GM model, you'll notice that the autofocus was a little bit slow. It had a lot of focus breathing. It didn't track well sometimes. That's all changed with this lens. So as far as photography is concerned, this lens is now about 3 times faster for focus, so it's going to catch that eye really quick. And if you're tracking a subject, it's now about 7 times faster. So this thing is a huge improvement for photography and autofocus. So if you're using the A9 Mark III, this lens is now supported up to 120 frames per second burst mode. So you're going to have very good tracking in that burst mode with this lens. So this lens has basically been designed to work very well with very high burst modes. And like I said before, the autofocus on this lens is very fast and it's very quiet. So if you're shooting video, this thing's not going to pick up any motor noise in your microphones. It's going to be a very quiet lens. So most of that's going to have to do with the 2XD motors, because those are just very silent motors and you're not going to hear a lot of autofocus sounds. So the minimum focus distance on this lens for autofocus is going to be 0.85 meters, which is pretty typical for 85mm lenses. And if you're in manual focus, it's actually 0.8 meters, so you'll get a little bit closer. So that was very expected for me on 85mm. Someday I wish we could probably get closer to subjects, but 0.85 meters is still better than some of the other 85s I've used in the past. So as far as autofocus for video, this thing is also still about 3 times faster, and it also is about 7 times faster for tracking subjects. You shouldn't have any issues now tracking subjects with eye focus or face focus, and that's going to be the same regardless if you're using human or animal or bird or car, train, whatever focus mode you're in. It's going to be very fast and it's going to track that subject very nicely. That was one of my biggest complaints with this lens last time, is that the tracking mode kind of got lost. You would move around and it wouldn't necessarily follow you. So the next big improvement to this lens is actually the focus breathing. The previous model, like I said, had a lot of focus breathing issues. This one is going to be quite a bit more minimal, and that's without even using the focus breathing compensation. So if you have one of the new Sony cameras that has the focus breathing compensation, you shouldn't see like any focus breathings. So that's going to be a huge upgrade feature for me, because even my Sony Batis still has the focus breathing issues. This is going to be very nice that this is going to be compatible with that, and you're going to pretty much eliminate that focus breathing. So for me, this has always kind of been more of a stills photography lens just because of that focus breathing, but now this is going to be a very good option for video. All right, so as far as sharpness on this lens is very sharp. It's very sharp in the center, and it's very sharp all the way to the edge of the frames. And if you're shooting anywhere near like a 1.4, this thing's going to have a very smooth, very soft, blurry background. So this lens is very incredible. In fact, this lens might be one of the sharpest lenses I've ever shot on. Very excited to see that. So as far as the price of this lens is concerned, I'll put the price right here. At the time of the filming of this lens, there actually hasn't been a price shared with me yet, so I'm assuming it's probably going to be anywhere from $18 to like $2,000, but like I said, price is right here. All right, so let's go take this lens out and let's go shoot some photography and let's go shoot some video. All right, so yesterday my niece had a llama competition at the county fair, and naturally, as the cool uncle that I am, I brought along the 85mm GM Mark II, took some photos and some video. So after all that country overload, I decided to head down to Minneapolis, Minnesota, try to get some cool city shots during sunset. I know there's a Twins game going on later, so let's just see what we got. All right, so this thing has been an absolute beast to use. Like, I love using this lens. This thing is incredibly sharp. It takes super fast photos. The video looked great. I'm just absolutely ecstatic about this lens. And then having it be in 1.4, it really good in low light. It's going to be very good blurry backgrounds. So I will say real quick, not having this go to 1.2, I could care less. I know Sony said that if they went to 1.2, the lens gets heavier, it gets bigger, it gets wider, and they wanted to keep it compact. So 1.4 is like super blurry backgrounds, and if you go any like lower than that, you're really just, you're minimizing what stays in focus. You'll hit eye, and then by the time you get to someone's ears, like it'll be so out of focus. So 1.4, I mean, like I shoot at like 1.8 usually at the minimum, just because even 1.4 is such a very sharp, like shallow depth of field. Like you don't have a lot of things that are in focus after you get like eye tracking. So what an absolute beast of a lens to use. So if you guys have any other questions about this lens, please feel free to give me a comment down below. If the video has been a help, please hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you want to follow along to other Sony content. And as always, guys, we'll catch you on the next one. Later.